Welcome to the Somewhat Creative Show, a podcast about the ideas, tools, and trends shaping the creative world. I'm Rocky Tilney, alongside Clark Miller, and each episode we dive into the realities of working in creative industries, design, branding, media, tech, and beyond. Today we're talking about expansion and how it relates to creative pursuits and growth. Plus, we'll be joined a little bit later on by John Hammelmann. John's a freelance motion designer, and we're going to talk a little bit about motion design and how it's evolving and really what we can expect in the future. Let's get into it. First topic, Clark, I think you have something really, really interesting you wanted to talk about today.
Yeah. So the thing I wanted to kind of kick us off with was something I found somewhat creative out there in the industry right now. It's a new kind of topic I hadn't seen before. This may be old to some people, but it was called participatory design practice. And it's this creative agency out of Norway actually did this branding for used to be an industrial harbor, and now it's a third space. And I don't know if anybody's familiar with these. I wasn't really, but it's basically a space for, cultural events, businesses to come, food trucks can come there. It's just this kind of a space for everybody. But what's really interesting is they designed this visual system. The branding for it is based on these three icons that make up this K, and for the name of the places like Culture Hagen Vegan Vugan. I can't remember how to actually pronounce it, but it adapts and morphs and depending on the application. So the idea here being like a food truck, for example, could come in and plant their flag in the space, and all their branding, they can change the logo of this space to kind of reflect what they're selling and what their business is. So I don't know. I found that and the idea of expansion and creating a space that can expand and change based on who's using it, creating a branding that can really change based on how it's being used and be participated in. I found that really kind of compelling. It could also just be a little bit of a I don't know, novelty, and who really cares if the logo can change to adapt the people coming in. But I found that really interesting, and I wanted to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think I love the idea. It's interesting as creatives and designers, we are fairly territorial about our work. So whenever you pull in collaboration on the creative side, I think a lot of people are afraid to do that, right? Because people are entrenched into their ideas, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's really neat to do that. I mean, I love collaborating with other designers on creative and pitching different ideas and getting different perspectives, because you get kind of insight into a new perspective that you wouldn't normally have. And I know when you and I have worked on projects together, there's always something you think about that I would have never thought about.
And vice versa. Yeah.
Perhaps. So I love the idea. And you've seen a lot of this in, cities and, towns and stuff where there's the mural designs. I saw another designer that I've worked with before. He painted a basketball court in a city, just a municipal park.
Cool. Mm-hmm.
Which is really cool. And so it's there's this idea of these shared spaces being designed and created by the community, which I love.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how much of this is the brand side of it.
Yeah. And maybe this is that it's kind of bringing that idea of bringing in the community into the brand itself, the brand identity itself, which, like you said, it's we've seen where a community will bring in members to do a mural or to design some aspect of a space, but this is taking it to that next level and bringing everybody into the design process in some ways.
Right.
Which now everybody considers themselves a designer anyway, so why not give them the opportunity to do it again?
It's interesting. Have we come across any other brands that have had the courage to have participation in their story visually? And it's through outside,
and a part of this is the creative. I think it's talking about expansion. It's also this is expansion in terms of, they say they can create you can create over a million different configurations of this project to suit
Mm-hmm.
whoever's needs. But the limitations are very confined. You're limited to the ones they've created, and they fit into certain portions of this logo. We can drop a link to some of this, but
Yes.
it's also, I wonder how the limits on the creativity and the limits on the participation in this kind of come across as being, stifling creativity and
Hmm.
the expansion of it.
Was this an idea that an agency they were working with
Yeah,
put out
it
there?
was an agency called I believe,
Mm-hmm.
but really kind of innovative. I thought that was interesting, somewhat
That is,
creative.
yeah, that is somewhat creative. I would agree. Um,
And our topic of the day, expansion, doesn't get more expansive than a million different combinations to create your logo.
and just so everyone listening understands, when we throw out a topic like expansion, like we've put very little thought into what we're actually going to talk about. So some of this is going to be just like seat of our pants. What does that mean?
Rocky, I put in a whole 10 minutes right before we
It's
started
more than
into
I have.
figuring this out. So
Um,
speak for yourself.
did have some ideas where we could kind of take this though, which is kind of
Yeah,
fun
hit
way
me.
to pivot off of a word. Like, what does it mean? So we have different topics, right? Creative expansion in the business side of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have brand expansion and growth, like evolution of a brand.
Yeah.
Um, and then just personal creative growth, right? Like, how do you grow as a creative? How do you expand as a creative? We have so many opportunities, so many tools, so many things to work with today that we didn't have even just 3 years ago
Yeah.
in terms of uh, generative AI. How does that unlock or expand our creativity, or does it? Does it not? It's another
Yeah.
topic we could get
Well, and I mean,
into for sure.
we're going to get into it later, but our guest today is a motion designer, John, and
Yeah,
how that industry has been incredibly impacted by the rise of AI and the constraints coming down on other designer. You don't have to spend months learning, After Effects or any of the 3D programs anymore. You can, and it's probably your work will be better because you understand the basics, but
right.
some of these new technologies that have come along and opened the doors and expanded the realms, we should say, of creativity into these areas for people.
Absolutely, and that's actually a great point. It's something we'll bring up with John later about how some of these new tools affect the creative process from a motion design standpoint. Because motion design, like filmmaking, there's usually a narrative that is the foundation for that motion design. So you're usually starting with something as high level as a storyboard all the way through, or a script, I'm sorry, then a storyboard,
Sure.
animatics, animation, all that. But we'll get into that with John. But I'm really curious to see how he feels that's going to play a role in motion design in general. But it does bring up another question, though. So, how do we balance our time and energy
Mm,
as creatives to learn new skills versus just really honing our craft or becoming like sort of masters of what we do?
yeah.
So, for
Well,
example,
especially while you're in it, while you're
while you're
working.
working on client
Yeah.
projects, you don't really have a lot of time sometimes, or you feel like, I just need to get this thing done. Like I
Hmm.
can't work on like honing my skills. But to become a master at something, you need the 10,000 hours, right? So how do you do that? Let's say as a logo designer,
Sure.
for example, how do you become a master logo designer?
I mean, I think it's the time. I think you put in the time and your research and you figure it out. I don't know. I think it's the 10,000 hours. I think you have to do it. I've always said, and I've said on this podcast before, like, don't wait to start doing something like a logo designer, for instance. That's one of the areas I started working in when I
Hmm.
started in my career, and I didn't wait till I had a client. And I think this is common knowledge now, but as a young designer, I didn't understand that that was like something you could do, and so I discovered this idea that you could just kind of create a fictitious company. I think I created a company called Volley. It was like a swimwear company, and I did a logo
Yeah.
for it, and it was like, it was cheesy at the time, I'm sure, and it was I can't even look back and look back on it fondly because it was probably so bad. But I created the branding for it, and fake business cards, and like a fake
Right.
website mock-up or whatever. And I put that on my website, and that was probably something that helped me get work, and so I think
The
that's
power, yeah, of the spec portfolio, right?
yeah. I mean, that's a way to expand your creativity, even if you don't have the opportunity, right?
Absolutely. And I've done my fair share of those too, as just more of like a practice, um, practicing my craft, practicing design, and really, we could probably do a whole show on branding and logo design. Um, at the end of the day, you're creating a logo for a brand for their customers. And we
Yeah.
talk about stakeholders in projects a lot, and oftentimes with branding, your stakeholders are your clients directly.
Hmm.
But really, there's another layer to that, which
It's
is
not for them.
it's for their customers.
Hmm.
And so that was obviously something that you learn over time as you're working with clients and selling your ideas. Is that, oh, this is for me to sell this brand idea or this logo idea, I have to pitch it as if this is something that's going to resonate with my clients' customers.
Yep.
That's not an easy thing to grasp and wrap your head around, especially as early on as a designer. I'm trying to make the client happy,
Hmm.
um, but if they want a direction that I don't think is right for their customer, that takes a little bit more effort and work to convince them otherwise.
Yeah, it's a tough balancing act for sure.
So going back to the original question I had about you know allocating the time, I think there's so much great stuff now in terms of YouTube videos and TikToks and stuff that there's actually a lot of people that put content out there about branding and design and logos in particular.
Hmm.
You see a lot of logo fun projects that I see on TikTok or Instagram Reels are when people take a current logo and they make it better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are fun. Um, and almost I'm sure any good experienced designer could probably do that with any logo.
Hmm.
But
They get a lot
again,
of pushback occasionally too, though. It's interesting. Those always get a fair
yeah,
amount of
and
people saying, "Why are you trashing someone's work? Why aren't you creating something, new and
well, there's a
not
missing
just?"
piece to that equation too. So sure, you could probably go in and make a logo better,
Yeah.
but is it as effective as the current logo? So there's a team that spent a lot of
Hmm.
time and money putting the current logo together strategically. And there's a reason for a lot of their decisions that they made. And so you're kind of just wiping that all away if you go in and make something quote unquote look better. So
That's a fair
that's
point.
how I have a problem with those too,
Yeah.
because there's no strategic brief behind the work. All right. Well, I think it's a great time to introduce our guest, John Hammelmann. John is a freelance motion designer. John's in the house, and welcome, John. Thanks for
Thank
being
you.
our first guest on our podcast.
Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
It's a historic
So,
occasion, John. More pomp and circumstance is needed, but that's all we got for
yeah,
you.
I'll do that in post. I'll add balloons and all that lame
There you
stuff
go.
on the
That's
screen.
great. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not a very excitable person. Sorry about that, but
Hey,
I'll work
your
on it.
work has to be excitable, though. That's
That's
why
right.
people hire you, right?
Yeah, that's
Um,
right. That's
Very
right.
good. So I'm going to give you a softball question to get us started, just to give our listeners kind of the lay of the land. So how does somebody like yourself get started in motion graphics?
Great question. It was my senior year in college at Fresno State. Um, I I was just majoring in graphic design, so I hadn't taken at that point any video courses or animation courses at all. I had a great professor, and he showed me basically what his son was doing. His son had gone to the Rhode Island School of Design, and basically he was a motion designer, and he did some work for a band called the Mobius Band, and they created this video, "The Loving Sounds of Static." And
Hmm.
so he puts this on. This is what my son's doing, a proud father,
Sure.
and he plays this for the class, and I was taken aback by this video. I was like, holy shit, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. And so that's the point where I said, at some point you're going to do this down the road. I don't know if it's in the next few years, but this is something you should pursue down the road, because I was so compelled by it. And so that was kind of the start of it. And it took me probably 7 years. No, not quite 7 years later, but quite a few.
It had to be
layers.
a while, right?
Yeah, it was a while. Quite a few years later. It was, Clark, as you know, was a graphic designer, and the gig I had after Diablo Custom Publications.
That's where John and I worked together years and years ago.
Right.
Not a motion designing company at all.
No. They could use some. But it wasn't at all. But after my next gig, it was for energy company, and I got laid off, and I was like, all right, now's the time. You got to do it, or you're never going to do it. Yeah. And so I enrolled in School of Motion, very famous by like all motion designers. Joey Korenman is the name, and he also wrote like the Freelance Manifesto for motion designers. And so I took just basically his animation boot camp. That's where I started, and all the projects that I had from that course got me in at John McNeil Studio in Berkeley, and which is
the rest is history.
Yeah, and that's how I got started. So that was maybe a long-winded explanation, but
no, I think that's really interesting. I think we all kind of have those desires, and kind of we see something and we're like, oh, I wish I could do that. And how did you get to that point? It's interesting that you had a professor that was really instrumental in kind of sparking that creativity for you, because I feel I definitely had a teacher once upon a time who set me down this path. I think we all have that, so it's really relatable to hear.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's always interesting to hear how people how they find their path, because not everyone has the same path. Usually it's like a starting point, a lot of squiggly lines, and then like you come out the other side. But then, just like life is, then you have more squiggly lines, and you pop out somewhere else, and that's part of the theme of our podcast today is expansion and expanding, and how do you kind of grow as a creative. And it's not a straight line. It's not a nice slow expansion like a balloon. It's pretty messy.
Well, and earlier, Rocky, we were talking about like, how do you balance that? How do you grow and expand your creative abilities while working, while doing other things? How is that possible? And I think, John, for you, part of it was getting laid off. And I think that's a relatable topic as well. I think a lot of us have been there where, the growth came because we lost the opportunities we were, paying the bills with, and had to figure out the next step. So I think that's a big part of expansion.
Well, absolutely.
That begs the question too: is expansion necessity?
Necessity is the mother of creativity, maybe
of invention.
We'll rewrite it. Yeah, it is invention, but I guess you have to reinvent.
Yeah, and that's exactly my story as well. Definitely was a layoff situation, and taking what I knew at that point and making that leap of faith. Not looking for another job.
I'm sorry I laid you both off.
Yeah,
I apologize several times.
It's it's a scary thing, to go and to change, to pivot like that, because it's not the greatest pivot going from graphic design to motion graphics, but it's quite a pivot still, and you're talking about, now you have a static portfolio that kind of has been your bread and butter, and you show people that's how you get hired. And now you have to create a new portfolio, a reel, and that's tough to do. And
starting from square one a little bit.
yeah, as a motion designer, it's like you're not going to make anything good the first, honestly, 50 projects you make. And I even
50 projects. Yeah.
You know what? Like, I was thinking, somebody said on LinkedIn, I saw them say it, is like 20. They're like, it takes like 25 projects. And I honestly think it's higher. I really do. Because there's maybe people who are more naturals at motion, no doubt, or just have kind of maybe a better background for it. Um, but you don't realize how much you suck until you've kind of gone down the road a little more.
I want to quote that. That's great. You don't realize how much you suck.
Right. And you don't even realize, you don't know like what you don't know kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's like it's just you don't even understand why it's not good. You're like, this just doesn't feel right. And it's like, well, you know, you have those principles of animation. You don't know how to execute them, or you don't even know the principles of animation. Right. And that's just tragic, you know?
I think we've all been there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I just recently did a After Effects little project in my work that I was trying to piece together some elements, and I was going, man, this doesn't work. Why is this cut so bad? Why could other people do these nice cuts? And I'm trying to get these pieces to work together, and they won't go together. And at a certain point, it's just, well, I guess it just won't be as good as I want it to be.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Fix it on the next one.
Yeah, and that's why I say 50, because I mean, there's always more to learn, and
I think I'm only on like project number 20, so I got a ways to go.
Well, it's like I don't know if it's true. It's like 12,000 hours to be proficient at something. I would
John's
say
going up from your 10,000 hours.
We talked about this,
10,000.
John. We talked about mastery and how it's the 10,000 hours.
He's tacking on a couple for motion graphics.
Yeah, maybe it's more for motion graphics.
There's another level to it. We don't understand it. It's way beyond our capabilities.
Yeah.
I would say, After Effects might be is one thing. You get into 3D, it's another. So
that is true.
I imagine it's also probably difficult designing something 3-dimensional in a motion graphics program on a 2-dimensional screen. I mean, you're trying to think in 3 dimensions while trying to create something on a flat, computer screen.
Yeah, it's I think from a motion graphics standpoint, something that I was really lacking in is just camera skills. Yeah. Being a photographer. Yeah. I mean, that was the whole thing, going to motion graphics from design. I was really lacking. It was like, okay, what type of lens do I use? How do I properly use depth of field? But then there's all those set design as well. So that's another actual principle of animation, is staging, your actual composition. So there's just a massive amount to learn.
I hadn't even really thought of that. I mean, you really are a one-man band when you're doing some of this motion design work. You're directing, you're staging, you're the camera operator, you're choosing the lenses, you're the lighting tech. You're doing everything that on a traditional, shoot in a studio with lighting and everything. You're doing it all yourself within this program. So I never really thought about that.
Yeah, and I kind of was thinking about this the other day, and I've thought, I'm always, AI is the new big thing now, right? I mean, it's like, it's a scary thing for the creative industry, I would say, right now, to some of us.
What is that? What is this AI what are you talking about?
Oh, Al, yeah, so we all know, and it's kind of taken over. But I was thinking it was like Cinema 4D was the original cheat from like an actual going into a studio, right? And it's like, now I could be a studio, just one person.
Yeah.
And so how much advancement was that? It's like incredible, and how much money did it save? And I mean, a massive amount. So
and expanded the resources for everyone, talking about expansion.
That's right.
It's actually a good segue that I wanted to get into, and Clark and I were talking about this a little bit, but I wanted to save the conversation for when you joined, and that is, AI obviously is going to be the theme of this next piece here. How much do as a motion designer, like you mentioned, you need to know camera angles, you need to know depth of field. Those have to all be simulated in your renderings, right? In your final output. How much how much of those disciplines do you need to sort of have a really well understanding of, like in photography? And then on top of that, uh, there are tools now where you can start with a script. You could start with a storyboard, and you could pretty much segment out an entire production for a video using AI. Now, yes, AI could write the script. Yes, AI could come up with the stills and the sketches for the storyboard. Yes, AI could come up with the keyframes. Yes, AI could probably do the animatic. Like, so we have this
Mm-hmm.
whole series of tools, and I'm just curious as a motion designer, and this is something we're challenged with as just, regular plain graphic designers and creatives. How do we inject the human element into that without having everything so robotic, seeing that we could kind of go soup to nuts on a video these days with AI?
I I think that's I think that's the goal maybe for the next, less than 10 years of AI,
Hmm.
Gen AI, because, you could get maybe 60% there, but
Right.
it's the nuance. The nuance is not going to be there. You can't creative direct it very well,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, uh, you try to creative direct your mid journey
Yeah.
images. Good luck
Yeah.
getting there.
Right.
So it's that final 40 to 30% where you're like, you're missing a big chunk of the stories with just kind of that small nuance. And
Mm.
Right.
so and so you know it's not there yet. Um, I think it probably will only get better.
Yeah.
Um, but it's just right now it's silly mistakes, and there's no way to really inject kind of the human element at this point.
Hmm.
Um, but I do think it's always going to lack a little bit of nuance. It's like, when you see the best people at their craft making something, it's the small details that really matter. And I don't know I don't know if AI will ever be able to go that last kind of whatever it is,
Hmm.
2%, where it's like,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's something the Coen brothers do different than whoever else, and it's
Absolutely.
like it's like the
Right.
small, it's like the little details, and I think it'll always be lacking,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
people desire authenticity, and so AI is great. It's amazing what it can do already. Um, I think in the future, instead of us kind of having that mindset where this is going to take over our jobs, it just means you're going to have to get creative with what you produce in the future.
Right.
Sure.
It might mean, maybe I don't solely do motion design as I did it before. Maybe I figure out a different niche that
Hmm.
I'm going to have to pursue. That's completely,
And this is the expansion
unique.
part we're talking about.
Yeah.
There's an old story about how a lobster grows, and the lobster grows from the inside out, but when it has to remove its shell and molt, that's its most painful part of its existence, is right before it
Mm.
releases its shell. And
Wow.
it's also a point of expansion and growth for it. And I think all of our stories, we've had those moments in our careers where, oh, this is painful right now. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I need to expand or grow or pivot or find out some other solution. I think we might be close to an inflection point with AI, but it's not necessarily like you said, John, that I think AI is going to replace our jobs. It's like we have to develop a different relationship with the tool.
Yeah.
and be able to figure out how does it enhance our creative offering as well. And I think that's going to be the challenge. And it makes me come with another question though. If you were talking to a young person right now, let's say just out of college that wants to get into motion graphics, what would you tell them to do?
Oh man, I don't know if I'd
Go the other
recommend.
way.
I don't know if
Run.
I'd recommend the career at this point in time.
Yeah.
I do
Just
think
too many unknowns.
it's awfully saturated at the basic level of motion graphics. So, I mean, it seems like every motion designer, they're going to know how to use, After Effects now. A lot of them are going to know how to do cinema. So you have both of those. Whether they're good or not, that's up for
Yeah.
debate. But it's awfully saturated. So I'd say if this is really your passion and you want to pursue it, it's gonna take a lot of work. Like I said, just a lot of learning and just personal growth. But find your niche, and like if your thing is really like 3D and you're into like product design, where you're setting up these gorgeous like perfume bottles or exploding kind of like audio systems where and they're super sexy 3D renders. If that's going to be your thing, really get good at it. And so I'd say that you're gonna like, because everyone's gonna be making kind of the digital junk mail stuff, and if like the ads that pop up that people are trying to click through on their phones, everyone can make that, and so try to make something that not 90% of the folks can make. So
that AI isn't already starting to do. Like I keep seeing these ads that are, I keep seeing one for a solar company. I don't know if anybody else. I think is probably because we were putting new solar panels on our house recently, and now I get ads for the solar company, and the ad is I can't remember which AI program it's using. John, you may know this, but it's these hands come in and take the solar panel off of the top of the house, and they start like squishing it, and it like kind of melts in their hand, and it looks good. I've seen it so often, and I know that there's an AI program out there where it's like a default action that you can apply to things. You just pick what object you want to squish into hands, and it just takes it out of the picture and squishes it.
yeah, I haven't had much time to experiment with AI. I mean, I need to probably more, but they're probably using like Runway or something for that.
It's one of them.
Yeah,
But like staying away from the things, I guess, that are so commonplace that AI is going to be able to be trained on it a million times, maybe is good advice. So it's keep finding that niche, I think, like you said.
yeah, and maybe it's not something that's obvious. Maybe it's something that's I've thought about this personally. I would like to really just create something that's going to last, like something actually tactile, and not have it just digital. So like maybe that can keep my creative juices flowing, where maybe it's completely something different.
Yep.
And that kind of serves the same kind of fills my soul as well as motion does. So it could be
So
something.
here's the challenge for you,
different.
John. To get to that point, to expand into that realm, you're not going to be able to get laid off because you're freelance. So you're gonna have to do it while you're also trying to get work.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But I think I'm a glutton for punishment. So if you want to kind of take that next step, you have to just try to find time.
Yep.
To do those things that, like I said, just you're passionate about, and kind of is going to feed that creative nature.
Well, and speaking of clients and work, how do you find it? Because I know this question is often like for people starting out, for freelancers, people leaving a job and starting their freelance journey. Like how do you go about finding work? How do you find clients?
I've been fortunate to just have a lot of really good former colleagues. So I would say over 90% of my work is just word of mouth, former colleagues, great people that I've worked with. And then it's just, maintain those relationships the best you can.
Mm-hmm.
Do the best work that you can. And, you know, freelance is still tough because there's still periods where maybe that group, that network isn't going to sustain really, it's still not going to sustain me having a consistent workflow.
Yeah.
So it's constantly just kind of networking with new people, and just being a pleasure to work with. That's like one of the that's like one of the traits that I think you have to have as just a freelance person. Just, you have to do your best work, but you also need to you need to be likable, and you need to be, a lot of times the clients, as you guys know, tough to deal with. Like if you're out at sea, it's like a hurricane coming your way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you're gonna have a lot of choppy waters in your ship, in your boat. So you need to be that person who doesn't panic during those situations. If you're a freelancer, you need to be the steady kind of force.
Right.
We're coming full circle here, John. We're coming all the way right back around to the start of this conversation. John is the steady hand at the wheel. He's not that excitable. He's going to get you through the storm. Don't freak out.
Yeah, that's right. And so just be dependable. Be kind of that you're going to have to work hard, I think, always, not only in just kind of meeting tight deadlines, but also that hustle of the things you don't get paid for. That you guys were talking about the business side of things. So it's networking is always a key part of freelancing, but it's also, unfortunately, invoicing and taxes and managing all your finances. So, which I hate.
Don't remind us.
And that's a topic we are excited to bring up on a future episode, is the business side of creative. It's the stuff nobody likes to do, right?
Because a lot of people, we don't want to talk about that.
A lot of people get into creative
painful
because
John,
it's fun, right?
John, what do you love most about motion design? Let's not talk about the things we hate the most.
Yeah, the stressful situations.
Yeah, you guys should save that for a different episode, and you guys should wear black and like you're attending a funeral or something.
We'll bring you back in to attend our stresses of freelance and business bookkeeping episode.
Yeah. The good things, though, are just, I think I'm a continuous learner. I always love to learn new tricks, and I just love to create things. And that's really, I love to get up every day and do that. And a lot of it doesn't make it out into the world. More of it should, probably, because I shouldn't be afraid to just put even crap out there,
Or works in progress. I think we all get a little worried that people are going to judge unfinished work.
Definitely. And, it's like, you guys have probably heard of Beeple, right? Do you guys know who Beeple is? Yeah.
Sure.
So he does a render. He does a render every day. And really the mentality of that is just, he gets incredibly good at what he does, and there's something to that. You're going to get better the more you do it. And you're going to find quicker ways to do it, and you're going to improve. When you look down the road, you're going to be amazed of how much you improve. So that's always motivating.
That's an interesting point, and it's one of the things I always think about too. And I can't remember who wrote this down, but they call it the 1%, the aggregate of marginal gains. And so if you get better, 1% better every day, where does that take you at the end of the year, right? Or whatever term you give yourself. So that those marginal gains are going to add up. So by doing a rendering every day, there's probably something that's being learned through that experience every day also, which is basically adding up to something greater than the little bit of rendering you did for that day. And you could you could apply that to any aspect of your life, really, but that's the practice.
Yeah, it is. I mean, yeah, and I think that holds true for just everything in life, right? If you're trying to get a little bit better and improve yourself, then you're just going to be a better version of
the big leaps are rare.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then in time, it's very rewarding. You look back and you're like, well, it's all worthwhile.
Yeah.
Right. So.
And your work has come along. I've followed your work since you left Diablo and started doing motion design, and when it was very small little tweaks here and there, and now it's full blown motion. So it's amazing.
It's not my dog.
Thanks.
I don't have one.
Sorry about that, guys.
It happens. Always happens. Worst timing.
Well, actually, John, we really appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on. I know Clark has one more question for you, so I'll let Clark finish off with that question and go for it.
I'm gonna steal from the great James Lipton inside the Actors Studio for this final question. It's how I would like to end all of our interview segments. I'm going to choose one of his closing questions, which apparently I learned recently were not things that he thought up. Like he stole this from somewhere else, so I felt a little better about stealing them myself. But one thing I love about your work and motion design in general is how sound can really be incorporated into the work. And actually, before I ask a final question, I did want to ask you, like, when you work with sound, and you mentioned like the music video that really inspired you to get into this work, like how big a part does that play in your work? Do you start with the song and then build around that? Do you find a song that is, perfect for the work you're doing? What's the process like?
I think generally, especially, I mostly work with sound when I'm cutting my reel, and it probably is better to start with the sound, because you're gonna want to base your visuals on just the crescendos and your cuts at different times.
Yep.
So I really think you'd be in a bad way if you didn't consider the sound of it. Right? It's like it's a fine dance. They go together, and so most of the time it's actually something that, as a motion designer, I haven't factored in as much until as of late. But it's really, I mean, if you look at the best motion pieces, they have great sound design.
Yeah, it's that weaving together of the two.
Yeah,
an area of expansion, John. Just saying.
Oh, it absolutely.
Into it. Now you can start being a musician on top of being a cinematographer and director and editor and everything else.
Well, that's right. It's like you can. That's just a way to tell the story, right? You can have a black screen and you could have a certain sound, and you know what's going on. A knock at the door.
With that, then let me bring it back around. James Lipton inside the Actors Studio. What sound or noise do you love?
Do I love? Huh. That's a great question, Clark. I wasn't ready for that one.
I mean, it's a deep one. You got to think of a sound or noise that you'd love to hear.
I actually, this is a weird one, but it's kind of nostalgic.
Oh, good.
I love the accordion. I love the accordion in general, because many years ago I visited Paris. And it just kind of reminds me of like riding the subway in Paris and just, hearing people on the old squeeze box. So I love the accordion. Yeah.
I was not expecting that.
I know, accordion sound. That's a good favorite sound.
Yeah.
Sound of an accordion. Love it.
Is nice.
It's lovely. It's lovely.
But I've seen the bumper stickers that say play an accordion, go to jail.
Oh.
So, yeah, this is definitely a different take.
Rocky, nobody knows what you're talking about. That is
The-
what bumper sticker says.
I
this.
have seen a bumper sticker. I will
think you
find
had
it.
A dream that you.
I will
saw
add
this
a
bumper
link
sticker
to
somewhere.
the podcast if I find it
Alright.
online. I
We'll have to do
guarantee
that.
I've seen this before.
All right.
some people need to reconsider what they're putting on their cars. I've seen some.
I mean, that's somewhat permanent too. Like those are hard to get off, so you got to really be committed.
Yeah,
to
especially
it.
after the glue bakes in the sun for 3 years.
Yeah.
Forget it.
That's right. But yeah, the accordion's a good one.
Thanks for coming on the show. We really appreciate having you.
Well, thanks,
Yeah, it's
guys.
really great having you. We love the insights that you've shared. I think our listeners will also get some really good tips and advice from this, and we look forward to having you on again. Maybe you'll be doing something else.
And everybody go out and listen to some accordion music. John's orders.
Yeah, I have a Parisian Cafe playlist I'll send your guys' way.
There we go. We'll link to it. Thank you, John.
Thanks, John.